right, good morning. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Ron Linvey. I'm Undersheriff with the Clay County Sheriff's Office, also the chairman for the Executive Board of the Northeast Florida Intercept Task Force, which is an exciting new partnership that we're here to highlight today. I'm proud to be joined by a distinguished list of guests for this important announcement. So with me today are 5 Northeast Florida sheriffs, to include Michelle Cook of Clay County, Gator Deloach of Putnam County, Robert Hardwick of St. Johns County, Bill Leeper of Nassau County, T.K. Waters of Duval County. We also have FDLE Regional SAC Mike Williams for the Jacksonville region, Homeland Security Investigations Tampa Special Agent in Charge John Condon, Operation Lightshine founder and president Matt Murphy, State Representative Sam Garrison, U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Florida Roger Handberg, and Chairman of the Tim Tebow Foundation Tim Tebow. We all stand here united to announce the launch of the Northeast Florida Intercept Task Force. Intercept stands for Interagency Child Exploitation and Persons Trafficking Task Force. This is a unique public-private partnership dedicated to shining a light of hope into the dark underworld of human trafficking and child sexual exploitation. We all know these cases can be difficult to investigate and prosecute, but there is no higher calling than protecting those who are vulnerable among us, and we are all committed to this cause. Here in Northeast Florida, we're blessed to have great law enforcement relationships at the local, state, and federal levels. And we've had that for years. But there's something that's different now. We all successfully work cases in this realm, but right now the big change is that we have 7 law enforcement agencies that you see represented here, representing 3 levels of government, local, state, and federal, who have committed full-time investigators and resources to work together in the same office to attack this issue holistically from a regional standpoint. This partnership will, in essence, erase jurisdictional boundaries and barriers to investigating and prosecuting those who manipulate and victimize our very young and vulnerable. What truly makes this effort unique is the public-private partnership that is supporting our efforts. The Northeast Florida Intercept Task Force was formed in partnership with Operation Lightshine, which is a nonprofit organization that provides partnerships along with financial, technical, and other resources to law enforcement task forces dedicated to the fight against human trafficking and child exploitation. Our effort here is the second in the nation in partnership with Operation Lightshine. The Tim Tebow Foundation is a partner of Operation Lightshine, and we're proud to partner with an organization that needs no introduction here in Northeast Florida. The Tim Tebow Foundation's dedication to serving children and tackling human trafficking is admirable, and we're proud to be associated with them. Now for a little background on the need for this task force. Human trafficking involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or a commercial sex act from another. Additionally, any person under the age of 18 involved in a commercial sex act is automatically considered a victim of human trafficking. The key element in human trafficking cases is not the movement of the victim, but rather the exploitation of that victim. The online sexual exploitation of children manifests itself in various forms, from online enticement to the distribution of child sexual abuse material to sextortion. Online enticement involves an individual communicating with the child over the internet with the intent to commit a sexual offense. Offenders who traffic in child sexual abuse material share photo and video files across the internet and dark web, re-victimizing the child each time the images of their abuse are shared. Sextortion occurs when a minor has shared an explicit image with someone they mistakenly trusted, who then blackmails them to produce additional sexual content, meet for sexual activity, or pay to keep their images from being shared. The disturbing reality is that the internet platforms we use every day to connect with each other and share information, including social media, online gaming, and email, are now being used for these illegal and illicit purposes. To put these issues into context, I want to share some startling numbers from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Their cyber tip line received over 29.3 million tips in 2021, which is the last year with complete statistics, with over 99% of those regarding incidents of suspected child sexual abuse material. That was an increase of 35% from 2020, just the year before, when there was just under 22 million tips received. In 2019, that number was just under 17 million. So as we can see from this trend line, we have an ascending problem nationally. This problem is an unfortunate reality for us here in Northeast Florida as well. In 2022, the Northeast Florida area accounted for over 2,300 combined child exploitation and human trafficking cases. All right, that's enough talking for me now. I'd like to invite a few of our key partners up to speak with you today about the initiative. And first up is Operation Lightshine founder and president, Matt Murphy.
Wow, this has been a journey to get here. What has started from the darkest place in my life and the loss of my sister and what has come from that, the pain to purpose from that has led me here has been probably the most unbelievable journey that I could imagine. And to have the men and women that have served the state of Florida, have served this country, and served this world in protecting the innocent and the vulnerable standing up here with me is the greatest honor and achievement in my lifetime. And I mean that. You know, my journey started when I became a Green Beret in the United States military, fighting counterterrorism all over the world. And through that counterterrorism journey, fighting it in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria, and working with multiple different military entities and government agencies and corporations and different defense contractors, what I realized is there was a complete holistic approach to solving a problem, terrorism. Everyone came together, put their pride aside, put their agency aside, put all of the beef and the red tape aside so that we could accomplish that mission to defeat terrorists in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and most recently with ISIS in Syria. What I didn't realize at the time is the lesson that would teach me later in life. In 2019, November 5th, 2019, my little sister Sarah went missing. And that was an all too common occurrence, unfortunately, in my family and in so many families in the United States of America because of the heroin epidemic and the fentanyl epidemic that we're currently under. And she would disappear all the time on drug benders and that is not an all too uncommon thing for a lot of families and people in this room. I'm sure everyone in this room knows somebody that has lost their life to heroin and fentanyl or someone that is struggling with it right now. But the dark side of that is that a lot of the women and even men fall victim to trafficking because of their addiction and their need for that. And my sister got pulled into that underworld. Now, the details of her death and exactly how it happened, we still have not been able to figure out. But on Christmas Eve, 2019, her body was found in a river. And the family finally got closure, but that sent me in the darkest spiral of my life. I got pulled out of my operational capacity as a Green Beret, got made an instructor, and then I'm sure everybody remembers 2020 COVID hit, and life shut down and changed for all of us. And I'll spare you all the dark, gloomy details of that. But one day I prayed, and I didn't know what I was asking for, but I prayed and I just asked for help. And that prayer changed my life. I started Googling human trafficking and child exploitation. I started to look into all of the things that were surrounding the fentanyl epidemic. I started to see just how bad the situation in this country had gotten, how vulnerable our children are, how much how they're exploited from every corner of the earth, because the second we hand our child a cell phone or an iPad, we give them access to the world, but we give the world access to them. And there's just so many threats that they're facing that we never faced as kids. And we're just learning about these threats and all of these things as we go, and as we find out about somebody being victimized, and usually from the worst case possible thing happening, the child being victimized or a human being trafficked. So I set out on a way to solve that. And I'll be honest, it started off pretty vigilante. That's all I knew how to do. And I got lucky enough to meet a gentleman named Jim Cole from the Department of Homeland Security. And his mentorship is the biggest reason that I'm here today. He's like, Matt, if you took everything that you wanted to do in the intel world and with analysts and with all of the data and all the ways that we found and fixed targets and for terrorists, and you put all of that behind law enforcement and saving children, then we could actually move the needle. We could actually start to get out from the pile of cases on our desk, which aren't cases, they're people, they're kids, they're vulnerable citizens, they're Americans, they're our future. We can actually make a difference. So he told me about a concept that he had worked on and bringing together federal, state, and local law enforcement. And we started just talking through the process. And he was like, if you could pull this off, I will move my agents out of the Homeland Security Office and I will move them into your task force. And because of a gentleman right here behind me, Tim Tebow, and Steve Belendo at the Tim Tebow Foundation, and a couple meetings with them, that dream became a reality. And I'm forever grateful for you. We were able to get a task force in Nashville, Tennessee. And Homeland Security moved out of their office and brought their agents that fought human trafficking and child exploitation in. And then a federal prosecutor moved out of her office, moved into the task force. And then everybody just got to work. And every eye was on us. All the skepticism in the world, all the criticism in the world. What are these guys doing? How are they doing it? Will this even work? Will this survive? All of that. And then an agent from the FDLE came up in the first month and just was like, what are you guys doing? And the next thing you know, the conversation started down here. And the dream that started in Nashville became the full reality here in Jacksonville and Northeast Florida. Now everybody's coming to join and work together. And putting aside the federal, the state, and the local, whatever there may be, I've never experienced something like my experience in Florida right now. It has been absolutely amazing to watch everyone come together and realize how crucial it is for us to work together and accomplish the mission to save our children, because if we don't do it in a grandiose way now, then we're going to lose our children. We're going to lose generations of kids to the problems that we face on the internet and technology and the access that people have to our children. So it is an absolute honor and a privilege to be here today, because what I started in an apartment in Nashville, Tennessee, not knowing the first thing about what a charity is changing lives. And I could not have done that without most people in this room and everyone standing behind me. And thank you all for the time. Thank you all for being here, and God bless.
I want to thank Matt for sharing his impactful story. I've had a chance to hear it before, and each time you feel it every time. It doesn't lessen, so we appreciate you being willing to share with us. Next up, it's my honor to introduce State Representative Sam Garrison for a few comments.
Thank you, Ron. Just on behalf of Florida House Speaker Paul Renner and my colleagues in the legislature, I want to say thank you for being here. This is a big deal. Just a quick side note. If you ever wondered what it's like to be in a locker room with Tim before you go out in the field, we just had that experience about 5 minutes ago, and it was awesome. I'm ready to take on the world, so thank you, buddy. Let me just say real quickly, before we get started, there's a lot of people here in the audience. There's folks up here who have the privilege and platform to be able to do some things. But there's a lot of folks in the audience that deserve some recognition real quick. I see a lot of prosecutors, investigators, victim advocates, many of whom we've known for a long time that are on the front lines doing the work on behalf of individual Floridians, individual victims, families that we know and love. So on behalf of all of us to you, we want to start this by saying thank you for the work that you all do. I see a lot of folks who've been working for a long time. I'll be very brief, but just to say that this is a joint partnership, not just between our friends in law enforcement, but between those of us in the legislature and other positions of elected responsibility. You're going to see this year and in the years to come in the Florida legislature a continued focus on our most vulnerable, whether that be seniors or our children, or folks that just can't take care of themselves. A big focus this year is going to be on protecting our kids, on safeguarding and preserving our families from all walks of life. You know, these things that we carry with us that have become indispensable in our lives have a flip side. And that flip side can oftentimes be very dangerous. And our kids, my kids, your kids, our kids, are exposed to things that we could never even imagine growing up. And besides all the pressures of anxiety and peer, all the stuff that comes with social media and all that stuff, which we're living with and understanding, there is even darker underbelly that these folks have seen, and that Tim has really dedicated a lot of his life to helping. And those folks need rescue. They need help. They need support. They don't just need the folks on law enforcement doing their part, although they're doing it. They need all of our help. And we're committed in the Florida legislature doing whatever is necessary to make sure these folks have the resources and the flexibility, and quite frankly, just the backing and support to make sure that they can do the mission that they're charged to do. In Florida, we really are one team, one mission when it comes to child safety. One team, one mission. And we're going to accomplish that mission. So on behalf of Speaker Renner and my colleagues, I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you all for what you're doing. This is how we do it in North Florida. We get it done. So thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Next up, I get to introduce a friend and longtime friend of law enforcement, U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Florida, Roger Hanberg.
Well, thank you, Undersheriff. I'm honored to be here today for the launch of the Northeast Florida Intercept Task Force. The fight against human trafficking is a top priority of the United States Department of Justice and the United States Attorney's Office. We are committed to vindicating the rights of human trafficking crime victims by bringing their traffickers to justice and working to ensure that survivors have access to the assistance, restitution, and services that are needed to rebuild their lives. As part of our efforts to achieve those goals, Attorney General Merrick Garland last year issued the Justice Department's national strategy to combat human trafficking. The strategy lays out the department's multi-year plan to combat all forms of human trafficking, focusing on efforts to protect victims, prosecute cases, and prevent further acts of human trafficking. A key component of the national strategy is what you see here before you today. It's collaborating with a wide range of partners, local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, non-governmental organizations, and survivors. And that is why we are all here today. As the United States Attorney, I am the Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer for 35 counties, including the 5 counties that are covered by this task force. There is part of this news conference today that's not news, and that's that the agencies that work in Northeast Florida, local, state, and federal, we all work very well together. For many years, our offices have partnered together to address issues of concern to our community. Through those joint efforts, we have worked together to protect victims, reduce crime in our community, and hold accountable those who seek to violate the law and exploit others. The Intercept Task Force is the latest example of the collaborative approach that we take here in Northeast Florida. And human trafficking is the type of problem that requires this type of holistic approach. The criminal organizations that traffic in persons, they exploit people and their vulnerabilities. Human traffickers sometimes move their victims from one country to another. Sometimes they move them between cities, sometimes they move them between states. And sometimes they don't move them at all, they just exploit them in one place. Regardless of which is the case, human trafficking is not a problem that can be solved by one law enforcement agency working alone. The Intercept Task Force is going to benefit from the capabilities and expertise of 3 levels of government. It has 5 sheriff's offices, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and Homeland Security Investigations, all teamed up together. Through their partnership, these 7 local, state, and federal agencies are going to ensure that justice is done in every human trafficking case and for every human trafficking victim. Knowing these agencies as I do, I have high expectations for what this task force is going to accomplish and what the community is going to see from this task force. The community should expect to see thorough and methodical investigations that focus on rescuing victims and building quality cases that dismantle human trafficking organizations. The community should expect to see teamwork, and collaboration that ensures that no human trafficker is able to use geographic boundaries to evade their responsibility and accountability for their crimes. And the community should expect to see a relentless commitment to preventing human trafficking, to prosecuting those who engage in those offenses, and to providing protection and assistance to the victims and survivors of human trafficking. As can be seen from this press conference today, and there could be no clearer message than all of us standing up here today, the members of the law enforcement community who are part of the Intercept Task Force, they're all united in this effort. And when those cases are brought to federal court, my office is ready. The United States Attorney's Office is committed to partnering with these law enforcement agencies to prosecute human traffickers in federal court. And I know that my office's commitment to prosecute those cases is shared by each of the state attorney's offices that serve the 5 counties covered by this task force. We are all truly united in this effort together. But no one law enforcement agency or prosecution office can do all of this by themselves. The community plays an important role in combating human trafficking. Preventing human trafficking is a team effort. Our efforts benefit when members of the community are able to recognize the risk factors and indicators of human trafficking, and when they see those, to report those. And this is a fight that benefits from the efforts of non-governmental organizations that do this important work. And I want to thank both Mr. Murphy and Mr. Tebow for the dedication and commitment of their organizations to combat human trafficking here in Northeast Florida. It is only by working together that we can address the problem of human trafficking in our community. And each of us here today is committed to do our part in this fight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. Our next speaker is probably the one that needs the least introduction in this room, but it's the chairman of the Tim Tebow Foundation, Tim Tebow. Thank you for being with us.
I'm honestly not deserving of standing up here with these courageous men and women. I'm really not. I'm humbled to be here. I'm grateful to be here. I just wanted to share a few words before we walked out, and I just looked at this group and said, just thanks for all coming together. Because how many boys and girls will be able to find faith, hope, and love one day because this group of people put the mission above the credit? A lot of times why we don't work together is because we're so worried about who gets the credit. But I'm grateful because this is a group of men and women that doesn't care, because what does credit matter when lives are at stake? When so many lives are in their darkest hour of need. That's why it's an honor to be here. And like I said, I don't feel deserving, but I'm grateful to be here. You know, North Florida it's home to me, and it's been home to me and my family since we moved from the Philippines when I was 5 years old. And I had the privilege growing up, whether that was at Normandy Baseball Park or at Lakeshore, or it was at Trinity, or it was at Nice, or it was even at the University of Florida, to be fortunate at times to every now and then win an MVP for being the most valuable player of a baseball game or a football game or even basketball. But man, if that's one of the coolest things that I did in North Florida, that would be a really big miss for me. But as cool as those MVPs are, they mean nothing compared to what this group is fighting for, and that's a way, way, way more important MVP. You see, I was competing for MVPs of being the most valuable player, which ultimately one day means nothing. It's just a game. But what this group is fighting for is real MVPs, meaning the most vulnerable people who desperately, desperately need us, need you, need all of us to work together to put the mission above the credit. just a couple of weeks ago, me and my wife were with one of our favorite people in the world. It's a young girl who was exploited for 6 years, almost every night. And she's one of the most courageous girls that I've ever had the chance to meet in my life. And she's someone that is an inspiration, truly an inspiration. People throw that out a lot, but I genuinely mean it. She's truly an inspiration to me and my wife. And I want you to hear from her. She writes, "My dark mask was worn at night. While at school, I would put my pretend smile mask over my dark soul, trying to survive another day until I ultimately lost myself. I let darkness fill me, and I wanted to die. I wrote a poem from the words that ran through my mind and heart over and over every single night." Rescue me. Help me. Monsters are chasing. Can't you see? Monsters are whispering. Can't you hear? Monsters are shouting. You're nothing. Can't you feel my pain? Monsters are pushing. End it all. Just jump. Can't you hear all the whys I'm asking? Monsters are laughing. You're all alone in this. Can someone please rescue me? That's from an amazing young girl that in her time of need, while she was getting exploited almost every night, she is crying out to every single one of us, "Please rescue me, help me, can't you hear me?" And today, we want to listen and we want to act. And people always throw around the term calling. I was called to do this. Well, you know what calling means? The best definition I've ever heard is an urgent and divine invitation to accept responsibility for a particular task. An urgent and divine invitation to accept responsibility for a particular task. This is urgent, and I also believe it's divine. That God hasn't just asked us, but commanded us to care for and take care of the most vulnerable. And it's an invitation to every single one of us. But are we going to accept responsibility for this task, for all of the MVPs, for the hurting boys and girls here in our backyard? We're fortunate now that God's let us serve in 79 countries around the world. And no one's more important or less important. But this one does mean a lot to us because it is home and it is our backyard. And we have an urgent and divine invitation to accept responsibility for this task. And I'm so grateful that this group of men and women has accepted that responsibility urgently, and also knowing that there's a lot at stake, like every boy and girl that is hurting. And that's why, to me, this isn't a press conference. This is a rallying point, not a celebration, not even a time to congratulate a lot of people, although I do want to congratulate and thank this group. But this is a rallying point, because right here, as we're meeting, as we're talking, so many boys and girls are in their darkest hour of need. And they're calling out to us, saying, "Rescue me, help me," because there's a lot of monsters that are chasing them. And we need an army of people that will stand in the way and say, "No longer on our watch," because every life is that valuable. So it's an honor to be here. We're truly grateful. Thank you, and God bless you guys.
Thank you for those wonderful comments, Tim. I think it should be very obvious, the value that we get out of this public-private partnership when we can bring in partners like Tim, bring in partners like Matt, and what they add to supporting us in our task force efforts. They really do this out of the goodness of their hearts, and they're driven to this from very personal and good reasons to try to make a difference. So we really appreciate those partnerships. All right, in closing, the work to combat these crimes is difficult, dangerous, detail-oriented, and very technical. But it's absolutely vital to keeping our young and vulnerable safe from exploitation. All of the partners you see here are committed to working together in a task force environment to amplify our successes, erase jurisdictional boundaries, and take a regional approach to protecting the vulnerable in Northeast Florida. We're also putting out a call to action to all of the residents of Northeast Florida. Specifically, we're asking you to report any information about human trafficking, child sexual abuse, or the trafficking and child sexual abuse material immediately to your local sheriff's office, or you can report it to federal law enforcement at 1-866-347-2423, or you can always remain anonymous by reporting your information to Crime Stoppers at 1-866-845-TIPS, or it can be reported to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children through their tip line at 1-800-843-5678. And they also have a cyber tip line where you can put in online tips, and that is report.cybertip.org. And however those tips come in, they'll all be funneled in this area to the agencies that are involved in this task force. So thank you for joining us today for this announcement about our important new partnership. We'll take a few questions, and then please feel free to speak with any of the officials you see gathered here today about the Intercept Task Force once we are done. And if there are any questions, I'll kind of handle them coming in. If they relate to the task force, I'm happy to answer those. If they apply specifically to one of our partners, I'll let them take the podium. So are there any questions? Yes, sir.
Will there be one office that concentrates solely on this, or will it still, will everybody send representatives to work out of one central location?
So we're about 6 months into the making of this, and our individuals are already co-located, working together right now every day. Cases are already being investigated, and the work's already being done. That's the beauty of this. We're not announcing a release today saying we're going to get started on this next week or next month. Our people are already doing this work. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Is there anything more that I needed to answer for that, or did I get that? Okay. Yes, sir.
What's the composition of the task force? How many members from how many agencies?
So each of the agencies that were noted has one full-time member. The supervision of that is provided by the Homeland Security Investigation Office. Their group supervisor is supervising the task force. Yes, sir.
6 months in, are there credible results that you can see?
So we're 6 months into forming this. They've been working together since roughly the beginning of this year. So we do have cases in the pipeline that are on their way through prosecution. So not quite ready to hatch those yet, but they're in the works. The one thing to note about these crimes, especially when they take place and they have a lot of online involvement, the investigative process and the subpoena process for those records takes some time. But we're already actively working cases. Any other questions? All right. One thing I want to do before we close out is I want to note the investigators and the advocates that are here in the House that are a part of the task force. I'm not going to point them out because they would absolutely hate that, but I would be remiss if I didn't thank them for their dedication to this effort and the work that they're already doing and will do going forward. So thanks to everybody for that. And once again, if anybody has specific questions for any member that they see up here of our group, please feel free to grab us on the way out. And thank you all for your time. Thank you.